For someone who started his career at a young age in Paris with BNP Paribas and also World Bank, at several stages of his career, he worked with financial institutions. He decided to take a jump into forming his own organization, Ubuntu. Welcome to this show.
Africa is poor, but Africa is wealthy. Africa has 48% of the global gold deposit. It's not a cryptocurrency, it's what you call a digital asset. It's an instrument that is backed by real-world asset, real gold. It uses blockchain technology which certifies ownership in a traceable way, and it certifies also how much gold and where it is and at what time.
How do you compare gold ETF trading in back home in Asian countries to this?
If the fund manager or the financial institution goes bankrupt, your asset is gone. In our model, the gold belongs to you directly. It's like you sending money from your phone, you're sending gold or you keep it. When I was actually in high school, the principal called my parents and said, your kid shouldn't stay in this school. So my mom was a bit like worried and was like, why do you want to fire him? He's top of his class. So I was sent in that special school in Paris, Lycée Louis-le-Grand. Most top leaders and a lot of French Nobel Prize went to that curriculum, and I was the only black child, African.
One thing that you want to come to India for?
Expand my consciousness.
Going to Notre Dame or going to Statue of Liberty in New York? One celebrity that you would want to see in India to work with your brand?
Mr. Jackie Shroff and Tiger Shroff, yeah.
For someone who started his career at a young age in Paris with BNP Paribas and also World Bank, at several stages of his career, he worked with financial institutions. It was a huge and momentous occasion when he decided to take a jump into forming his own organization, Ubuntu. What is Ubuntu and what he is today, from the continent like Africa to have made it to the top 30 list of the Forbes. He has made giant waves across the country. I'm meeting this gentleman here in the beautiful settings of New York to talk about what essentially his organization is today and what he wants to do with a technology like blockchain in the next 20 years or so or beyond. Welcome to this show. Wonderful speaking to you, sir. What is this organization, Ubuntu Holdings, that you call, which you formed at a very young age of just about 40 after having worked with BNP Paribas, World Bank and so on, and then yet draw huge investments from the Silicon Valley that you have over the last 3 years or so, sir?
So first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor. I just want to correct on the Forbes, I was top 10 most influential.
Top 10.
Top 10 most influential man in Africa by Forbes.
Right.
But basically, so Ubuntu Group, which I started after my last position in my career, which was managing director for GE, General Electric,
right,
in charge of investment and project finance for Africa, for all the subsidiaries of the group in Africa: power,
right,
water, mining, oil and gas, transportation, healthcare.
Right.
And that was a great experience since I was covering more than 40 countries at the time. And I realized that, you know, along all my travels, I would go to one or the other countries on the continent and come back 6 months later. And, you know, my friends would be somehow frustrated or demoralized. And and entrepreneurs working very hard, pushing the agenda, trying to transform their country.
Right.
But, you know, the valuation of their company or their revenues would have been slashed because the currency would have depreciated.
Right.
And for me, you know, I thought this was pretty unfair because, you know, for reasons that they can't control,
right,
no matter how hard they would work,
right,
then their value, their net worth, or their hard work wouldn't be rewarded the way it should.
Right.
So, and then I thought, look, wait a minute. Africa's GDP might be $4 trillion, yes.
Right.
Global GDP $88 or $90 trillion.
Right.
But Africa's natural resources is estimated at more than $100 trillion.
Right.
And when you see gold, it has gained 500% in more than 50 years since
Right.
1971 to the dollar. And
Right.
over the past 5 years alone, gold gained 108% to the
Right.
dollar. So,
Right.
and when you know that Africa has 48%, right, of the global gold deposit,
Right.
here comes the question is, Africa is poor, but Africa is wealthy.
Correct.
So I had to address this question, which was ultimately, how do we leverage on Africa's gift in terms of natural resources
Correct.
to avoid, those kind of situations?
Right.
So because I was with IFC World Bank in charge of investment in telecom media technologies for almost 8 years, I was very familiar with technologies, new technologies, innovation, and so on. And I was exposed also with blockchain technology. And I thought, oh, okay, maybe we can tokenize the gold that is underground or that has been extracted and issue a digital certificate of gold ownership to people on their mobile phone backed by real gold, right? This way, people could be able to buy gold from as low as 10 cents from their phone, and the gold will be stored in secured vault in Singapore, in Dubai, and in Europe, and they could claim that gold at any time. But because it's a digital asset,
Right.
then they could trade, send it maybe as a remittance or keep it as a savings, so that even if the currency depreciates,
Right.
they have something that appreciates, and then it's gold for all.
Correct.
Right? So that was the idea of starting Ubuntu Tribe. Prior to Ubuntu Tribe, which we started 5 years ago, we started Ubuntu Capital, right? Which
Right.
objective was to really help to with an advisory, investment banking / merchant banking activities, help.
This was
This was prior to Ubuntu Tribe. This was in 2015, 2016,
Right.
when I left GE. So we were advising leading organizations and corporation and investment groups in their trajectory in Africa and in the strategy where we'll help them combine financial and social return inspired by
Right.
the Ubuntu philosophy. And Ubuntu means I am because we are. And it meaning that you don't exist in isolation. We're all interconnected.
Right.
It's close somehow to this concept of namaste when you say the divinity in me salutes the divinity in you. It's this sense of we can do good and do well.
Absolutely.
And that is what has inspired all our philosophy. So today, Ubuntu Tribe, we are operating, on 5 continents, right? We registered in those continents, and we really democratize access to wealth by tokenizing the resources. So it's not a cryptocurrency. It's what you call a digital asset.
Correct.
It's backed by
It's a
real
passive instrument.
Yeah,
It's a passive digital
It's an instrument that is backed by real world asset, real
Correct.
gold.
Which is my next question to you, Mamadou, is that back home in India, when we compare things like ETF,
Yes.
ETF gold,
Yes.
because India has had ETF gold for a very long time now.
Yes.
And it's like similar to trading commodity, what you generally do, a commodity trading on the sense.
Indeed.
Of course, I do, many Indians do as well. How do you compare gold ETF trading in back home in Asian countries to this as well?
This is a great question. Thank you. So basically, here is a reality today about ETFs,
Sure.
right? So what is an ETF? ETF is a traded fund,
Correct.
right? With
Depending on the price of the gold.
on the
every day.
price. So it depends on management of that.
Correct.
On the people who manage that
Correct.
fund,
Or the bank or the-
or whether it be a bank or the
or a
fund
private
manager,
person, yeah.
etc. So then it means that if the fund manager or the financial institution goes bankrupt, your asset is gone.
Correct.
Right? Think of the case of you have Silicon Valley Bank. You had a few. Now, when those banks went bankrupt,
Right.
with FDIC, I think you could only claim
A
up to
portion of it,
$200,000, right? What if you have a few millions? Then it's gone, right?
Correct.
That's one thing. The second issue when you use intermediaries like that is that when you look at the gold market, did you know, and this is what I've heard to be verified, but that the London bullion market, gold is 8 times over encumbered.
Right.
It means that
Correct.
if things collapse tomorrow,
Right.
if 8 people come and claim the
Only
underlying
then.
gold,
Correct.
only one might
person.
get it.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, what is different in our model is that the gold belongs to you directly.
Right.
You have sovereignty on your asset.
Right.
You can trade it without calling the bank and say, I want to sell, and wait for a few days. It's like you sending money from your phone, you're sending gold, or you
Correct.
keep it. Why? Because it uses blockchain technology, which certifies ownership in a traceable way, and it certifies also how much gold and where it is and at what time.
And-
It means that today, you don't need to rely on one, an intermediary that could have problems and your asset is gone. And second, you have proof. In our case, our gold is audited by the best digital asset audit company in the world, which is Fox and Trotter, which produces a report of how much gold is in the vault.
Correct.
On top of it, you have, we work with another partner that compares how much gold is in circulation. I
Right.
mean, how much tokens are in circulation versus how much gold is there. So you have full-on security on the blockchain. On top of it, our customers can come and verify how much gold there is. And in a simple click, they can say,
They can
okay, I'm going to send gold to my cousin in
Correct.
Bombay,
Right.
right? And the ownership changes, the gold doesn't move.
Right.
And that your cousin can come and say, okay, I received this, I want the gold. Or they can turn it into cash or keep it as a savings instrument.
And to add to this, they can also withdraw. Is there a limit for withdrawing, or is there?
It
withdrawal
depends
for
on the
selling?
country KYC. So we first of all, we are a fully regulated entity out of Europe. And we have a license as a virtual asset service provider. And we're one of the rare digital asset companies in the world who can claim to be fully regulated and licensed.
Right.
Right? And on top of that, it also allows us to do an exchange and so on. So we are subject to very, very strict compliance, right? Close to what is required on the banking level, right? And it means that the customers can effectively, based on the country KYC, so we have what you call smart contracts. So we would look at what country you're from based on your passport and where you live,
Right.
and follow the local regulations and rule as to how much you can cash out, etc., based on
Okay.
the regulations.
Right.
But nothing prevents anybody, if you have $10 million worth of gold, to cash out.
Right.
Right?
There's no lock-in period.
There's no lock-in period. You can take it at any time. What we also offer, and it's going to be live by the end of this year, you can stake your gold, meaning you lock your gold in a wallet, we verify that it's locked, and then you get loan to value.
Oh.
Yes.
See, was this in the physical gold or the digital gold?
It's the digital, but it's linked to the physical. It
Physical.
means that the physical cannot move, and your asset is locked. So you cannot claim your asset until you've repaid. But it means that instead of, for instance, go and sell your gold to get cash, lock it, and then we give you a loan so that the value of your gold goes up,
Right.
and then you get the liquidity to do whatever you want
But then
without losing
how do
your
you
gold.
verify the person's physical gold in that case?
Because the gold is stored in private regulated vault that we manage or that we work with third party.
Oh.
So for you to get our token,
Right.
it means that we know where your gold is. But
Correct.
you can come if you want, bring your gold, and we tokenize it for you.
Right.
But it goes in a full-on system, right, where the third party who are regulated declare
Right.
that this gold was provided by that person, and therefore in exchange they have this amount of tokens that is backed by the gold that they have.
Correct. Now, I want you to take you back to the memories of having worked with the financial institutions, whether it was your days with the GE or World Bank and so on, and also, of course, with BNP Paribas. Now, having worked with World Bank, I believe, and I have a reason to believe that you must have had an incredible exposure, Mr. Mamadou, to various financial institutions, various political leaders, various businessmen, top honchos and CEOs of the globe. What was it to have this incredible career with the International Finance Corporation in the World Bank and take those learnings and imbibe them and use them here at your new organization?
So this project is a result of
Because I must tell you that this was also the period when Africa as a continent was growing. And I remember in 2003 there was an ICC World Cup in Africa as well. I was part of,
Indeed.
and I had
Yeah.
gone to cover it as well. And this was the time when you had Zimbabwe, Kenya,
Indeed. Yes.
ICC tournaments taking place back to back.
Yes.
One a knockout tournament to the 2000, and then 2003 the World Cup in
Indeed, and
in
also
Africa.
a few years later, in 2010, the Football World Cup in South Africa.
Football World Cup.
Yeah, and I've been lucky and privileged to be part of this Africa Rising wave, right, since the early 2000s.
By the way, I also remember one of the songs from Canaan, Rising Flag.
When I get older, I will be stronger. They'll call me freedom, just like a waving flag.
Yes. Raise your flag.
Flag.
Yes, indeed.
That
Yeah.
was part of the World
Yeah,
Cup
what part of the World Cup song?
of 2010.
So, to your question, I started my career with KPMG in Paris,
Right.
And my role was to audit top global financial institutions, right? So that alone as a start, I was lucky and privileged to come from an Ivy League school, EDEC Business School,
Right.
who is ranked number 5th by Financial Times in the world in finance, right? So I was, as a child of an immigrant, born in Africa, when I arrived in Europe as a child, my dad told me, look, you're going to have to be twice as good as anyone else. And I was like, why? And he said, look, because you're different, right? You're coming with a bit of a disadvantage, and you're going to have to work very hard and be the best at what you do, because if not, you might not have the same chances. So that programmed me for excellence, right? So
What was your professor?
this was my father.
Father?
Yeah, he told me that
And
when
what was he doing at that time?
my father actually arrived. He arrived in France as a refugee, as a clandestine, etc. And then got his papers and then started working, studied, and he wanted to do music. So he went to study music.
So you had your schooling and college both in France?
I had my high school and the university in France.
And your
And before
kindergarten
that I was in
and everything?
Africa, yeah. Kindergarten and primary school I was in Africa.
what part of Africa at that time?
Cameroon. I was born in Cameroon, yeah.
Right.
So, but I always kept a very strong link to the continent. So, and what happened when I was actually in high school, the principal called my parents and said, your kid shouldn't stay in this school. So my mom was a bit like worried and was like, why do you want to fire him? He's top of his class. Okay, he's turbulent, but you shouldn't, And the principal said, no, we don't want to fire him. Actually, on the contrary,
Right.
The reason why your child is turbulent is because he's extremely bored.
Correct.
And you need to put him in a
He needs excitement in his
Right,
life.
exactly. He needs to be challenged. So
He needs
you need to
challenges.
put him in a type of school where he would really be able to reveal his potential. So I was sent in that special school in Paris, which for a long time was the best schools. I think 2 out of 5 French Nobel Prize
What
come
was
from
it
that
called?
school. Lycée Louis le Grand, right?
Lycée
Louis le Grand. So
Louis le Grand.
yeah, and for a long time, I mean, most top leaders and a lot of French Nobel Prize went to that curriculum, and I was the only black child, African, in
Right. Even the Nobel Prize winners also went to the same school?
some French
Nobel.
Nobel Prize winner went to that school.
Excellent.
Some French presidents went to that school.
Such as?
I think
The president?
Chirac.
Jacques Chirac.
And Valéry Giscard d'Estaing. I'll need to check that.
Don't worry,
but-
we'll find it out.
Yeah. So, and also, Georges Pompidou
Right.
went to that school. So,
Right.
so basically, when I arrived in that school, they told us, you the elite of the nation, and the bar was very high. So the culture of excellence was instigated very young with me. Go for gold or go home.
Right.
And as an African, I realized one thing. I was like, I was privileged. I was the only black student in that school. And
Right.
for me, it triggered something. It was, okay, how do I ensure that anybody can get the same opportunities, right?
Correct.
Because I knew there were people, and it's the same in India, in Africa, who were much smarter than me,
Yeah.
but would never have this chance,
Correct.
right? So I made a vow to myself that in anything I would do, I would create something that create equal access to opportunities.
Correct.
Since because I was privileged.
Right.
And now, yes, because I went to those Ivy League, I got access to some of the best training like I mentioned, at Business School, and started with KPMG, then went to BNP Paribas. With BNP Paribas, I was advising governments, top CEOs within their strategy. It was mergers and acquisitions, project finance, government advisory, debt restructuring. So that required a strong level of technicality.
Correct.
And also, the best in finance are actually the most creative.
Right.
And luckily, I had that creativity to find innovative solutions, etc.
Right.
And what it taught me was rigor and excellence, right? And attention to details.
Correct.
In terms of, and also a stature. When you start talking and engaging with some of the most powerful people
Absolutely.
of the planet, they have a certain level
Correct.
of expectation.
Right.
You need to meet those expectations.
Correct.
And therefore, excellence was the way. And then the World Bank really opened my horizons to some of the best talents in finance and economy from around the world converging into one organization to make a difference.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I had great experience. I also had questioning at the World Bank, right? But it was a fantastic school in really understanding how the world works, how development works, and also what role developing countries could play to reach their own autonomy.
Right.
Versus the usual narrative, which was an issue for me,
Correct.
which was poverty reduction.
Right.
And I went to see the vice president. I said, we shouldn't speak about poverty reduction. We should speak about wealth creation,
Correct.
right? Why limit ourselves?
Correct.
Basically, what I also learned when I was there was macro. How do you develop a nation from a macro perspective,
Right.
Socioeconomic development models and so on. So I had at the same time the micro, project finance, developing projects, but also macro, understanding things at a holistic level.
Correct.
And that has been a great school.
Excellent. Now, another interesting question which I want to ask you is the fact today, Mr. Mamadou, that gold may of course be one of the significant savings instrument because it has gained about 500% for the past 20 years and maybe 30% even if we compare to the dollar as well.
Yeah.
However, if you were to compare today this sort of an investment to real estate, foreign currency, stocks and mutual funds, what are the advantages that you see over mutual funds, stocks, foreign currency or real estate portfolios?
So if you adjust to inflation, gold has outperformed the S&P 500.
Correct.
And has outperformed real estate in the US.
Right.
And this is inflation adjusted.
Maybe not in Europe yet.
In Europe, yes, because the point is, since the euro has...
Ever since the Brexit, there has been some fluctuation.
Yeah, and also the real estate in Europe is not equivalent in the different areas.
Correct.
But gold has outperformed, if you aggregate the real estate in Europe, gold has outperformed real estate also.
It has?
Yes.
Though many believe that real estate is much bigger an investment in Europe because of the ability to use the Schengen visa with many foreign investors coming in and acquiring the wealth because they believe that the real estate portfolio was at one stage very cheaper, which Europe
Yes,
could
it
not.
was caught up, but the reality is why people first, in terms of absolute growth
Right.
and inflation adjusted, gold has outperformed. But more importantly, it's a matter of liquidity. You can sell gold faster than you can sell a house.
Right.
At the end of the day, right? So of course you can get to real estate ETFs, right? But now the beauty about blockchain and tokenization is that you can tokenize an apartment.
Correct.
Right? And if you can't afford a $1 million apartment, if you break the apartment and you issue 1 million tokens worth $1 that represent that apartment, anybody can buy a piece of that apartment and then get the growth
Correct.
that we're talking about. Yeah.
Right. So, Mr. Mamadou, as a chairman of Africa 2.0, which is a not-for-profit organization, you seem to have been helming a lot of young leaders of your own community of Africa and the diaspora across the globe. Africa 2.0, I believe today, has a footprint in at least more than 30 countries or so. What is this Africa 2.0 about, and how much sense of pride you take today to groom and nurture these young leaders under your tutelage, or rub shoulders as well as give them opportunities to see the exposure which you did at your level?
So let's go back to the reason why Africa 2.0, right? At the time, I was with the World Bank, like I mentioned, with IFC, and I was a bit frustrated. I felt everybody had an agenda for Africa. Europe had an agenda for Africa. America had an agenda for Africa. China had an agenda for Africa. But I was frustrated because I realized what's
Africans
Africa's
don't have.
agenda for itself, right? And as I was traveling, doing all those projects, etc., I realized one thing. I was like, Africa needs to take its destinies at hand.
Right.
Right. And then I went to speak to the leadership, and I said, I'm going to start an organization that would gather the best and brightest from our generation that the continent has to offer, bring them together under one banner, to one platform, and we will work to build that vision for Africa.
Right.
So within that collective, we had advisors to heads of state, chief of staff of prime ministers, CEO of top companies who were younger. You had also other types of entrepreneurs, artists. And the point was to create this collective, and we worked for 18 months and had chapters and champions per areas to co-create this vision for Africa.
Correct.
And we needed a name, and we started actually on the back of the World Cup in 2010, right? Since we knew that so many people
People are
were
going to be
coming,
coming to
right?
watch the World Cup.
And I was lucky and privileged to have the backing of Nelson Mandela
Right.
and Graça Machel, his wife, who she was very supportive. And we finally got them in the margin of the World Cup to look at if there were 10, what are the top 10 problems of the continent that we need to fix. That's how it started.
Right.
And from there, we co-created a vision, and we presented it a year and a half later in Davos at the World Economic Forum, in margin of the World Economic Forum. And it was a huge success. And after that, we went at the African Nation,
Correct.
at the African Union, to present this manifesto.
Right.
And also very well received. And 3 years later, 47 heads of states ratify Agenda 2063, which is literally a program over the next 50 years proposing a vision for Africa.
Excellent.
So Africa 2.0 Foundation was more like what I call a think tank, a think tank that does things, right? A do think tanks, where we combine action and thought leadership, and we deploy pilots to articulate how our recommendations could work so that they get adopted and scaled.
Excellent.
And today, and down the road, we also got selected by President Obama as part of a consortium to run the Young Africa Leaders initiative of President Obama for the West Africa cohort, where I think close to 60,000 young youth could participate digitally or physically into the program. So Africa 2.0 is really that thought leadership organizations carried by a generation to really help move the African agenda and transform the continent, where its citizens take ownership of the destiny by acting proactively to make recommendations. And that was also a very good school for me because, of course, we had chapters in China, in Beijing, in 28 in Africa. We had chapters in London, Paris, Germany, America with Chicago, New York, Washington, and LA. So it became this significant spider web of young Africans collaborating together to, and all benevolent, right? So we all had our day job, but determined to make a difference in transforming the future of the continent. So
how did you get actually into blockchain? I am also intrigued.
Yeah. So how did I get into blockchain? So if I look at my career, I've been almost every decade at a turning point, at a technological turning point for Africa, and I've been at the forefront, right? In the early 2000s, Africa skipped fixed line to go to mobile phone. And I was involved in the first biggest M&A deal for GSM and funding some of the top GSM companies, which is Airtel in Africa, Yes, MTN, Telecel also, with Orascom, with M&A. So I was at the forefront.
I remember, in fact, Airtel was one of the sponsors of cricket series in
Yes,
Africa as well.
Airtel bought Celtel from Mo Ibrahim.
Correct.
And we used to fund Celtel when I was in banking with BNP Paribas, and IFC was a shareholder into
So it
Celtel.
was you who sort of clinched that deal between Airtel and the Africa?
I can't claim I clinched the deal, but I definitely spent a lot of time working on it.
Right.
Right? So, and then I was also involved in funding, making the first investment in the world at the time in mobile money, mobile banking.
Correct.
And the rationale for me, it took me a while to convince IFC World Bank to get in it, was the time it would take to build, branches of banks everywhere with roads, etc. The infrastructure could not be copy-paste to the Western world. We needed to use technology, and there were a few tech companies who were moving money on the phone, and I made that first investment. It was one of the first, if not the first in the world. And I was also involved with M-Pesa at the very early days when they got a grant to start
Correct.
working on it.
Right.
And now M-Pesa moves 40% of the GDP of Kenya,
Right.
Transactions is $1 billion a day. And then I was sitting on the investor side, on the financier side, for those two major revolutions in Africa. The third one is blockchain and AI. And I
Right.
could see that because I needed to solve this question of how do we solve this paradox of poverty built on unrealized wealth?
Right.
Blockchain allows to value your wealth underground without having to extract it. The
Correct.
same way as if you look at real estate, a piece of land has value. A piece of land with a building has a greater value.
Absolutely.
So why not having gold, lithium underground
Yeah.
wouldn't have value before you
Absolutely.
extract it. You just have to discount, right?
Absolutely.
Now with tokenization, with satellite and so on, I can measure how much gold, lithium, coltan is in the ground.
Correct.
And apply a value to it
Right.
and tokenize the rights to these assets that is underground,
Absolutely.
because there is no better safe
Absolutely.
than Mother Earth.
Correct.
Suddenly we monetize wealth. But in that case, I didn't want to be on the banker investor side. I wanted to be on the forefront because I accumulated 20-year experience
Right.
in finance, economics, technology, to be able to serve our people and the planet by extracting responsibly the resources of Mother Earth and make it available to any citizen on the planet, starting by Africa, who are the people who live on those resources.
Right.
And the beauty of scalability of this model is that finance is based on two things: asymmetry of information
Right.
and collateral,
Correct.
right? Asymmetry of information means I know something that you don't know that makes me want to invest and hoping that it would grow.
Correct.
Right? And that's how people make investment in stock
Absolutely.
markets, or with the hope that it will grow. Or you would say, oh, this is risky because I don't know, so I will not invest.
Correct.
Because you don't have the information, so you'd refrain from investing. That's asymmetry of information. The second thing is collateral, meaning if I'm going to lend you money,
Correct.
then I'm going to ask you,
What is it that I can put
what
something
is your
against
project
it?
for? What do you give me in return? That's
Correct.
why people have land as collateral, as car, or they go and give their jewelry,
Correct.
right? Now, how do you disrupt this whole model? What blockchain does, it addresses the question of asymmetry of information because it gives comfort, certainty, traceability on how much asset is there, who owns it, and it's a digital certificate of ownership of
Plus
this
it's
asset.
safe.
And it's safe, right? Why? Because either your gold sits in vault or it sits on the ground,
Correct.
right? And then you tokenize it. The second thing is collateral. Guess what? When your monthly revenue is $200, I don't know how much is that in rupees,
Correct.
right? You might not have a house,
Right.
but if you can buy gold-backed tokens, suddenly you have a collateral to get micro loans on it.
Correct.
And whomever lends you, it feels safe because it's locked on chain, plus the asset is locked too.
Absolutely.
So we address this paradox of finance
Right.
by introducing blockchain and AI. And also because now we introduce AI with big data, we can understand your consumption pattern, your spending patterns, your borrowing patterns, and allocate a credit risk automatically for you to be able to fund.
Absolutely.
And you also have decentralized finance. Banks struggle to reach out everyone in the population.
Correct.
But if you look at Grameen Fund, what made it successful was the community was being accountable for the borrower.
Correct.
Now with blockchain, you can have a collective accountability model where they also can fund you
Correct.
as long as your reporting model is on chain.
Correct.
So you decentralize finance, it becomes finance for all. And that's the revolution that we're carrying today. And that's what Ubuntu Tribe has vowed. And this is for me my legacy.
Excellent. Right. I'm going to start a rapid fire with you, just like we do with all the politicians, celebrities, and entrepreneurs across the globe, to make, of course, viewers know about how much you know about yourself and maybe your own country and maybe the personality that you are, sir.
Sure.
If you were to become, Mr. Mamadou, an entrepreneur in your next birth, who would it be? Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, or Elon Musk?
Steve Jobs,
One thing that you love most about Africa.
the motherland, the source.
One thing that you want to come to India for.
Expand my consciousness.
Investment in a cricket team or buying extra gold for your own family.
Investment in an ashram.
One outfit that you love the most wearing at your most cherished moments forever.
That's a tough one. An African black cape.
African black cape.
Yeah.
What is that one food that you love to have with your family, and what is that one food you love to have your fork and knife dig deep into with the business leaders?
The one food that I really love with my family is a jollof rice from Senegal, and with business leaders, lamb chops and salad.
Going to Notre Dame or going to Statue of Liberty in New York?
I would go to the Statue of Liberty of New York because the Statue of Liberty of New York was actually inspired from an African tribe in Morocco, the whole outfit. And the lady that was represented in the Statue of Liberty was actually half African, who's actually, people don't know that. So I would be there just to tell people the actual symbol of liberty and freedom in the land of freedom is actually from the motherland in the context where the motherland have experienced tough things like slavery, colonization, etc. But still, the symbol of freedom goes back to the source again.
Your first salary at General Electric and then later on at BNP Paribas.
My first salary at, I would say, at KPMG in France, when I started, I think it was 2,500 euros.
Right.
And at GE, it was definitely, let's say, 100 times more.
Correct.
At least.
One last question, which is that one celebrity that you would want to see in India to work with your brand?
Mr. Geoff, that we just spoke to. Mr. Jeff,
Jackie Shroff.
yeah,
Tiger Shroff.
Yes, Mr. Jackie Shroff and Tiger Shroff. Yeah.
Right. It was wonderful having you, Mr. Mamadou, on this show. We hope that you bring a lot of success with whatever you did as a young son of an immigrant decades back, with the same grit, determination, and iron will for what you are doing for your own community and for the world at large. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Wonderful.
Thank you so much,
sir. Keep following me, Rohan Dua, on the New Indian.